The sky did not explode. It did not burn. It simply changed. And that was far more terrifying. At exactly 9:17 UTC, every satellite orbiting Earth recorded an anomaly that no astrophysicist could immediately explain. A dark curvature appeared in space above the Pacific Ocean, as if reality itself had folded inward. Commercial airliners reported sudden turbulence without wind. Military radar systems across multiple continents lit up simultaneously with the same impossible reading. An object of immeasurable mass entering low planetary orbit without passing through detectable space. Within seconds, the anomaly unfolded into structure, and structure became something unmistakable. A ship? No, not a ship, but a floating continent of metal and alien geometry materialized above Earth, vast enough to eclipse sunlight across half the hemisphere. Smaller vessels detached from its underbelly like metallic spores, positioning themselves with terrifying precision over major world capitals. Humanity had always imagined first contact as a historic conversation, perhaps cautious but hopeful. Instead, first contact arrived like a silent verdict. Every screen on Earth activated at once. Televisions powered on inside abandoned apartments. Smartphones lit up in locked pockets. Digital billboards flickered from advertisements to a single unified broadcast. Even secure military terminals that were not connected to the internet displayed the same image, a tall being clad in living armor that shimmered like molten silver. Its eyes glowed with controlled intensity, not rage but certainty. When it spoke, it did not speak in one language. It spoke in all languages simultaneously, each listener hearing it perfectly in their native tongue. The voice resonated not only through speakers but faintly within the mind, as though the sound bypassed the ears entirely. The being identified itself as High Executive Varkesh of the Galactic Empire and informed humanity that Earth had reached what it called the threshold of interstellar contamination. The message was chillingly calm. Humanity would surrender planetary sovereignty, dismantle all military capability, and submit administrative authority to imperial oversight. In exchange, the species would be preserved. There would be no negotiation. There would be no gradual transition. Humanity had 12 minutes to comply. Panic does not unfold uniformly. It fractures. In New York, traffic halted as drivers stepped out of vehicles and stared upward at the impossible shadow stretching across the sky. In Beijing, emergency sirens wailed as government officials were rushed into fortified underground chambers. In Moscow, strategic missile forces were placed on immediate readiness, though commanders privately questioned whether nuclear weapons would even scratch something that size. In Delhi, Islamabad, London, Paris, Tokyo, and dozens of other capitals, similar scenes played out with different languages but identical fear. Financial markets collapsed within seconds before being forcibly frozen. Religious leaders called for prayer. Social media erupted into chaos before global networks began failing. Under unprecedented strain, fighter jets were scrambled, rising toward the alien craft, only to find their instrumentation malfunctioning as invisible gravitational distortions bent the air around them. The Empire had not fired a shot, yet it had already demonstrated dominance simply by existing. Inside hardened bunkers beneath mountains and cities, world leaders convened through emergency quantum encrypted communication systems. For decades, humanity had prepared contingency plans for asteroid impacts, pandemics, nuclear war, and even limited extraterrestrial contact. None of those scenarios had assumed the arrival of a force so overwhelmingly superior that conventional defense bordered on absurdity. Some leaders argued that survival at any cost was the only rational option. If surrender ensured preservation, perhaps subjugation was preferable to extinction. Others rejected that logic outright, warning that the word preserved might translate to enslavement, experimentation, or cultural erasure. Intelligence analysts projected casualty estimates in the billions if the Empire chose immediate sterilization. Military strategists presented simulations that ended in failure within minutes. The room filled with arguments not just about tactics but about identity. Was humanity willing to exist as a managed species under alien rule? As the timer counted down from 12 minutes, something unexpected began to happen. Instead of splintering permanently along national lines, governments initiated data-sharing protocols that had been locked behind decades of distrust. The United Nations Security Council, long criticized for paralysis, passed an emergency global defense authorization with unanimous approval. It was not born from sudden idealism, but from a simple recognition: divided, humanity would certainly fall. Unified, there was at least uncertainty. And uncertainty, however small, was the only space in which hope could exist. Secret research projects were unlocked. Artificial intelligence systems previously restricted by national firewalls were granted temporary cross-border authority. Military, satellites, submarine fleets, cyber warfare units, and aerospace defense grids began synchronizing under a single improvised command architecture. Humanity had never operated as one organism before. Now it attempted to do so in less than 10 minutes. In a subterranean facility beneath Geneva, a quantum systems engineer named Aisha Rahman found herself at the center of this unprecedented integration. She had not trained for battlefield command. Her expertise lay in complex adaptive algorithms designed to model chaotic systems. Yet chaos was precisely what humanity needed. As alien ships adjusted their positioning in orbit, Aisha observed patterns in their energy fluctuations. The Empire's fleet functioned as a centralized network, with the flagship acting as the primary processing core. Its dominance relied not only on superior firepower but on near-perfect coordination. Remove coordination, even briefly, and superiority could falter. Direct attack was impossible. Energy readings from the flagship suggested shielding capacity beyond terrestrial comprehension. But overwhelming force was not the only path to resistance. Interference, unpredictability, and systemic overload could be weapons of their own. With 8 minutes remaining, Aisha initiated a protocol buried deep within multinational research archives. A concept once dismissed as impractical, Project Mosaic. Rather than concentrate power into a single counterstrike, Mosaic dispersed action across billions of nodes. Every satellite under human control began transmitting randomized quantum keys in constantly shifting patterns. Submarines emitted sonar decoys that created phantom fleets across the oceans. Civilian internet routers were temporarily repurposed to generate electromagnetic noise. Financial servers, weather monitoring systems, research observatories, and even personal smartphones contributed to a planet-wide interference web. It was messy, inefficient, and unlike any traditional military maneuver. Yet its very disorder was its strength. The Empire's sensors, designed to interpret structured opposition, encountered something fundamentally alien to their predictive models. Coordinated chaos. Alien drones descended into the upper atmosphere in response, emitting pulses intended to suppress electronic disruption, but human systems rerouted dynamically. When one satellite was neutralized, 3 terrestrial transmitters compensated. When a network node failed, alternate pathways emerged. The sky above major cities shimmered with plasma trails, as hypersonic missiles detonated not against ships, but at calculated atmospheric coordinates, creating ionized layers that refracted targeting beams. Fighter jets acted as distractions, weaving through gravitational distortions not to win but to complicate. For the first time in its expansion across thousands of star systems, the Galactic Empire faced an opponent that did not attempt to match its strength directly. Instead, humanity forced the Empire to process a storm of irregular variables. With 6 minutes remaining, scientists executed a maneuver that bordered on audacious symbolism. Using solar gravitational lensing techniques, theorized decades earlier, they amplified a tightly focused transmission toward the flagship's command core. The source of the signal was unexpected: Voyager 1. The ancient probe humanity had launched into interstellar space in the 20th century. Long ignored by most of Earth, it still carried a golden recordan archive of music, languages, and greetings intended for unknown civilizations. Now that archive became part of a larger data cascade. Humanity transmitted compressed libraries of art, literature, mathematics, historical footage, and raw emotional recordings: birth cries, laughter, symphonies, protest speeches, and whispered love confessions. The flood of contradictory human experience struck the flagship's analytical systems. Imperial processors attempted to categorize it as psychological warfare, yet its content defied simple classification. It was not propaganda. It was humanity in all its inconsistency. As Imperial shields recalibrated under the combined strain of electromagnetic interference and solar-reflected radiation amplified by orbital chaff clouds, High Executive Varkesh confronted a new reality. The Empire could still obliterate Earth, but not without consequence. The interference had introduced uncertainties into navigation and targeting arrays. More troubling was the unpredictable behavior of humanity itself. Species previously conquered by the Empire had followed logical survival pathways: surrender or resist in organized fashion. Humanity blended cooperation and defiance in a way that destabilized probabilistic forecasting. Imperial doctrine prioritized efficient expansion, a conquest that risked disproportionate damage to a flagship of such magnitude violated strategic norms. With less than a minute remaining, the global broadcast resumed. Varkesh's composure showed strain as he addressed the planet once more. He accused humanity of irrationality, of risking annihilation for pride. Yet even as he spoke, New anomalies emerged in Imperial systems' feedback loops, triggered by Earth's decentralized interference web. On the ground, civilians watched, with a mixture of terror and fragile hope. In Lagos, a young girl managed to route her tablet through an unsecured relay channel and projected her voice onto a public stream, asking simply why humanity should surrender its right to choose its own fate. The question, though insignificant, in tactical terms, encapsulated the core of human resistance. The issue was not victory. It was autonomy. When the 12-minute deadline expired, no surrender signal had been transmitted. Humanity stood not with superior weapons, but with unified defiance, for several agonizing seconds. Nothing happened. Then, gradually, the smaller alien vessels altered formation. Energy signatures shifted from offensive alignment to withdrawal configuration. The colossal flagship adjusted orientation, its shadow receding as it ascended higher into orbit. A final transmission from Varkesh acknowledged humanity as an anomalous civilization requiring reevaluation. It was not praise, nor was it defeat. It was recognition that conquest would not be immediate, easy, or costless. Within minutes, the fleet initiated faster than light departure sequences, vanishing as abruptly as it had appeared. The sky cleared, sunlight returned. Around the world, people emerged from shelters and stared upward, uncertain whether to celebrate or prepare for eventual retaliation. Casualties were minimal compared to projected extinction scenarios. Yet infrastructure damage and psychological shock would take years to address. More significant than physical survival, however, was the transformation that had occurred in those 12 minutes. Nations that had distrusted one another for generations had shared command authority. Civilians had contributed to planetary defense. Humanity had experienced itself not as fragmented states, but as a single species confronted by external domination. In the weeks that followed, global politics did not magically harmonize, but something fundamental had shifted. The knowledge that unity had deterred an interstellar empire lingered in collective memory. Research into space defense accelerated with unprecedented transparency. Cultural exchanges increased, fueled by a renewed appreciation for shared identity. The Galactic Empire had intended to force submission through overwhelming presence. Instead, it had catalyzed cohesion. The day humanity stood against the Galactic Empire was not marked by triumphant explosions or heroic last stands in the traditional sense. It was defined by synchronization under pressure, by the decision to resist even when odds appeared insurmountable. 12 minutes had revealed both vulnerability and resilience. Humanity had not proven itself the strongest species in the galaxy, but it had demonstrated something perhaps more formidable, the capacity to unify unpredictably. In the face of extinction, and somewhere beyond the stars, an empire that had conquered thousands of worlds now carried a new data point in its vast archives to record that Earth was not a passive prize, but a civilization willing to stand together when the shadow fell.